Okay, we're asked to solve this lovely equation. I notice that the left-hand side has 4 terms, so I'm going to try to factor it by grouping. And what I mean by that is I'm going to look at these first 2 terms and factor out the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is going to be a 2 sine x. So I'm going to pull out a 2 sine x. And then what's left inside? Well, a 2 cosine x minus radical 3 then I'm going to look at the second grouping and I'm going to try and get the same thing in parentheses after factoring something out. So what could I factor out to get the same thing in parentheses? Well, I could factor out how about a minus radical 2. Because if I factor out a minus radical 2, I'll get, what's left? Well, 2 plus 2 cosine x. This plus will become minus. And then what's left from radical 6? Well, minus radical 3. And if you don't believe that, just multiply out the minus radical 2. You'll get minus 2 radical 2 cosine x plus radical 6. Radical 2 times radical 3 is radical 6. So now the idea is both of the 2 terms we've created by factoring contain a common factor. This entire quantity, 2 cosine x minus radical 3. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to pull that out of both of these terms. 2 cosine x minus radical 3. Don't forget the equals 0 on the end. And then what's left? Well, the 2 sine x minus radical 2. So we're going to set both factors equal to 0 and solve at this point. So we get 2 sine x minus radical 2 equals 0, or 2 cosine x minus radical 3 equals 0. Okay, so solve both of these little equations for, well, the first one for sine x and the second one for cosine x. So if I add radical 2 and divide by 2, I'll get sine x is equal to radical 2 over 2. Here, if I add radical 3 and divide by 2, I'll get cosine x is equal to radical 3 over 2. So it breaks down to just solving these 2 little equations. You know that the one of the x values that will satisfy this first equation is pi over 4. The other one, well, it's going to be in the second quadrant because the sine of x is also positive in the second quadrant as well as the first quadrant. So it's going to have to be 3 pi over 4, because if you take pi, you can think of this as the reference angle. And if you take pi minus pi over 4, you get 3 pi over 4. So here are 2 answers, and then let's solve cosine x equals radical 3 over 2. Well, in the first quadrant, x has to be pi over 6. Again, it's one of those special angles, so it's just something you're supposed to know. And then what other quadrant is the cosine positive in? It's positive in the fourth quadrant. So if you just take this guy as the reference angle and take 2 pi minus pi over 6, you'll get 11 pi over 6 as another angle that works. And since we were just asked to find all the solutions between 0 and 2 pi, we're done. You might want to list them in order. So you could say pi 6, pi fourths, 3 pi fourths, and 11 pi over 6 are your solutions.